On behalf of CMASTE in the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta, we welcome you to the CMASTE seminar for this afternoon, featuring our colleague, Dr. Lixin Luo. And I'd like to first of all acknowledge that the University of Alberta, its buildings, labs, and research stations are primarily located on the traditional territory of Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, and Ojibwe, Saulteaux, or Anishinaabe nations. Lands that are now known as part of Treaty 6, 7, and 8 and homeland of the Métis. The University of Alberta, the Faculty of Education, and CMASTE respects the sovereignty, lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Today, colleagues, we have the honor and the pleasure of hearing Dr. Lixin Luo. Dr. Luo is a learner and an assistant lecturer at the University of Alberta. Her doctoral study focuses on what recursive mathematics curricula might be like in theory and in practice. Her visualization of recursive curricula won the first prize in the University of Alberta Images of Research contest in 2019. I know we're in for a delightful talk this afternoon, as I had the honor and the privilege to be part of the dissertation journey. I had the opportunity to read and give feedback on this amazing piece of work. And I want to thank Dr. Luo for coming to share. And I look forward to, shall we play towards recursive mathematics curricula. Thank you, Lixin, and welcome.
Thank you, Mia and Florence. And thank you for your participation. And I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. Okay, can you all see my presentation? Okay, good. Okay, so this is the title. And I know you guys all had a very busy day, so I like jokes, so I want to start with a small activity. And I'm going to show you some images, and I'm going to show the image one by one. And after each image, you're going to just consider what might come next. You can write down your anticipations and keywords without sharing. And then we will end after I finish sharing 3 or 4 images. So here comes the first. Okay, here comes the next. So assume that you all written down maybe 2 words or 1 word just because you did not think, your prediction changed, and that's okay. And again, there is no correct answers for this. It's mostly your interpretation. Whatever works for you works. And so the third one. Okay, assume you guys are done. Now, is it possible for all of you kind of just type those 3 words in the chat? I cannot see everybody, so if you're willing to share, of course, you don't have to. I don't know how can I see the chat though.
Lixin, you might have to show me those pictures again. I was having a hard time seeing them on the size of my screen. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Now they're all together in one. Can you see them clear enough? Was it just because my screen is, I wonder whether I can.
No, I think I need to go full screen. Okay.
That's it. This one.
Thank you.
Does it help?
Yes, it does.
Oh,
Thank you.
Sorry.
So yeah, I was trying to figure out.
This one.
Yes.
This
Thank
one,
you. So now you wanted 3 words.
Well, I guess you already, yeah, you have most phases through the process, right? I wonder whether everybody has the same issues that cannot. Mia, are you okay? And did you see all those 3 images?
Yeah.
I can see all the images and I just posted something in the chat.
Yeah, because I don't think I can see the
You can
chat
see the chat?
here. Oh, yeah, I guess I can see. Okay, there was one. Okay. The dishes. Okay. That's the first word.
Mm.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, okay, so enter. Okay, I guess, maybe because the how small the screen is, the image is, it's harder to do this activity as I planned it. That's okay. I guess my question would be now then, and based on the three images, can you anticipate what might come next? No, right? And that's okay. But if I show you the next image, an orange, what do you think about the past that you have already experienced? The three images that you have just seen. What do you think about them? Yes, I guess there's a chat coming in here. Sour. Okay. So the difference of this new image showed up. So it's a sour, and this sour does not exist in the previous three image. Is that what you're trying to say, for Florence?
No, I was trying to think about the theme that went through all three.
Mm.
So sour at the reality of the dishes and not the travel plans, right? Then there's a contrast of somebody painting a nice picture and somebody behind bars. So someone is sour. And then in the let them eat cake kind of is like a sour, and then I am fine. So I thought it was a contrast in each of them about emotions. It could be about emotions.
Okay.
The representation of emotions. And the orange reminded me it could be a lemon. So it was sour.
So that category sour candle showed up after the orange showed up, right?
Yes, yes, it did.
Okay. So those three sort of become a whole, because now you are establishing a holistic, comprehensive story to try to capture all four images, right?
Yes.
So you actually, this exercise here, I was trying to have you go through a process that's designed to invite you to reconsider the past and understanding it differently. And I think at Florence, you just did that. You basically had using the new arrival and then help to reconsider all the past three image differently. Had the orange not showed up, your understanding of the past three image would be different.
Yes,
right.
Because I wouldn't have used that thinking in each of them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Florence. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. This little things will come back later. So I have a lot of things to try to talk. I got excited and trying to show, but I don't think I can cover everything. So I'm just going to go through very quickly a basic information of my study, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about, certain newer understandings and focusing on this concept of equivalency, and we'll go through a design model and try to go. I hope I can go into this playful experiment, but we might not have the time. But we probably can leave it, if you want to stay and hang on and try to see something. Okay, my study is I asked the question, what my high school's recursive mathematics curriculum be? And it's a hermeneutic inquiry, and the theoretical framework is complex thinking. I use three methods to generate text and autobiographical reflection, document analysis, and hermeneutic conversations with teachers. And complex thinking is a point of view or a way of thinking, and it look at the world as a collection or a full of abundant complex systems. A complex system or the system that can learn and adapt through self-organization. An example complex system including like living systems, cognitions, cultures, knowledge, and climates. And the complex system can only emerge with its new order. Its future cannot be pre-decided. And so that kind of what we see in children, how they grow, and how knowledge develop too. The complex system also exhibit self-similarity. You can see those image I posted here, and the typical fractal-like phenomena, it's broccoli, and you can see this kind of self-similarity and actually displayed in different things in nature. And this side, if you can see my mouse moving, this left-hand side of the image is actually human lung. So the similarity between human lung and the trees are very obvious, and they are all complex systems. And a complex system actually has the ability to demonstrate some holistic features that are not possessed by any of the parts. And William Blake's poem actually captured this feeling of self-similarity very well, is to see a world in a grain of sand. Complex systems are formed by recursion. Recursion is a reflexive iterative process, and this is the keywords in my study, and I want to see how it look like in the curriculum design and in education. I'm going to, so from the perspective of complex thinking, knowledge is not understood as a static building, so a static building which is inert and mechanical, is made of parts that they are fixed. And so building this structure is like you're just accumulating the parts. And knowledge is understood as a living system, which is dynamic and organic, and there is no fixed division of parts. The change of any single part can trigger the transformation of the whole. Through the perspective of complex thinking, learning is understood as transformative instead of accumulative. And so learning is not a process just putting parts together, as you can see in this top sequence, building a car, but it goes in cycles. In each cycle, and you have the complete product, so-called. And from one cycle to another cycle, you go through transformation. Okay. And this one example that you can see in math understanding is that if we learn division in the elementary school, our understanding of division will change as we encounter other concepts as related division, such as fractions, like limits later, much later in grade 12. And so all those newer experience will transform our understanding of the path, which is our understanding of division. But at the same time, you make all those three concepts different. And this kind of difference can trigger the transformation of one's understanding of mathematics as a whole too. And so learning is a very empowering process. And from this perspective of knowledge and learning, and the recursive curriculums are needed. A recursive curriculum centers on the looping back process, such as reviewing. And this process is supposed to be generative instead of reproductive. Reviewing is a nice entry to go into both theory and practice, because reviewing, as you can see in this embedded and nested image here, I consider reviewing is a form of recursion, just because they share the same structure of looping back. At the same time, reviewing is a common pervasive practice in the curriculum. And so I can use reviewing as an entry point to have a conversation with experienced teachers. I can also try to see how reviewing is representing itself in the textbooks. And in order to be able for me to be able to do my research and talk with experienced teachers, I ask even more practical question, which is how can we help math learners to learn something new from what they have encountered before. Next is I'm going to just talk a little bit about hermeneutic inquiry, which is my methodology. And hermeneutic inquiry interesting in interpretation. So it tried to understand through interpreting text. And there are three kinds of entry texts for my study. And the first one, autobiographical reflection, is where I reflect on my learning and teaching experience and try to mostly focusing on my experience with revealing. And the document analysis is where I analyze and read teaching documents such as textbooks and program studies and try to see how they promote reviewing process. And hermeneutic conversation with teachers is where I have a weekend workshops, which held monthly for 6 months with experienced teachers. And in those workshops, we work on, this is the image of my workshops. The workshop focusing on, a particular form of recursion. And then we talk about what we think that process might be. And through that concept analysis, we try to design certain curriculum elements, certain curriculum tasks to promote that kind of process in the classroom. And this, there were like a different number of participants in those workshops. And I had a 1 to 4 teachers work with me. And there was 1 teachers actually go through all workshops. And you can tell that different workshops has a different focus, but they are all form of recursions. Very interesting part about the workshop is that there is a 3rd dimension, which I haven't anticipated before, but it showed up when I was analyzing the workshop, while interpreting the workshop information. And I realized that I actually will learn some math concepts by interpreting the workshop texts. And okay, so what did I figure out? Concepts, there are certain concepts reinterpreted, as you know, that my focus are those 3 concepts: revealing and recursion and recursive curricula. Recursion is a key process of the recursive curricula. They are, so that's, you see this kind of nested diagram here. So if I understand revealing differently, it's going to help me understand recursion differently. And it also will help me understand recursive curricula differently. And so they kind of inform each other. And I also generated a recursive curriculum design model. Hopefully I can have a time to show you more examples. And there is a visualization of recursive curricula also showed up. And that's the image that you saw at the beginning of this PowerPoint presentation. For revealing, it's reinterpreted as re-encountering, and revealing is not a reproductive, not just trying to see something again and see it better, or making it familiar more familiar. And it's to re-encounter what we have encountered before and try to perceive it differently. So it's a generative process, and it's a process to make the familiar strange. And there are 3+1 forms of re-encountering. And I call it 3+1 just because, the 3 forms, re-languaging, re-imaging, re-embodying, they can all be viewed as restoring. And they are basically using different kind of mediums to try to have this thought expression process. And so we can try to express the same idea and differently and using different kind of medium. And through this process, we can understand the idea that we try to express differently. You might say, hey, this is nothing really new. Isn't this already what's happening in a classroom? And that's what the teacher's doing. And they get a student to, verbalize differently. They try to get a student to draw a different image. They try to get students to, have a different physical experience. Okay, the difference is I'm not focusing on be. I'm focusing on be like. So you can see there's a keywords here, like. What might something be worded like? What might it be imaged like? Oh, imagine it like. And what might it be embodied like? Right. So it's not really about trying to make a new representation or new expression exactly the same. It's to try to have something equivalent. That's why this is the key idea of equivalency that I need to talk about later. And so right here, I just want to emphasize the re-encountering is not always about, two things versus one thing versus another, which one is better, or if not, it's not even about one thing and another thing. But it's really about what's the space between them, how they are talking, inform each other, and how we can be invoked to think differently just because we are encountering both of them. And it's not, the encountering is not a process about a message only, but also about medium. And for those of you who are familiar with the semiosis and the medium theory, you might not feel the idea that you're going to hear might not be very strange for you. Okay, I don't know. I don't think I have enough time to go through all of my examples. So I'm just going to go in, and if you want to see this PowerPoint, I will send it to Mia, so whoever wants to read it, right, they can read it later. So here I just want to go directly to this, this story. I can come back to those examples later if you want to see those examples. I just want to go on and to talk more experiments. So that's why I want to just focus on one story. Okay, this story is like this. Maxine, and she's my participant in one of the workshop, because we were talking about how can we get students to experience the same idea differently. And so she brought up this manipulative integer token, which I was very, very new to it. I have never used it in my classroom, and I personally don't know much about it at that point. And so she basically explained the process she need to go through to demonstrate -6 minus 2 equal to -8. And the drawing, she drew some tokens on the board, and then I kind of break down her actions into steps after I was analyzing and the workshop data. So basically what she did is that she drew 6 negative tokens, and then she drew 2 positive tokens in red and 2 negative tokens, just because she needs to take away 2s, and she started with no positive token. So, and the last part of the action is that she crossed it out, and it representing that she take those 2 negative positive tokens away, and then she count what's left. So now you have like 8 negative token left, and that's how the answer was derived. And at one point during the workshop, we start to trying to envision, is it possible that we parallel our actions that we do in one representation system and parallel like those actions, mapping them to another representation system, which is number line. So that means I need to map, those steps to another step, but those steps will happen in the number line, right? And that process is interesting because but none of us have done it before, and it caused a lot of confusion. And then we did not realize that, okay, this seems like pretty easy. We just thought it's kind of easy, but then there was a lot of issues came up. And one thing is that I did not know that I already collapsed those 2 understanding of negative sign into one. So negative sign can also read it as well, the minus sign here, and also can be understood as a negative sign. So, but they look the same. And then it was not an issue when you're dealing with integer token, because negative number is represented differently, was taken away. However, on the number line, how can you actualize that kind of action? How do you present, negative to like negative tokens using walking, that kind of actions? Then how do you represent taking away using, actions, right? So I did not realize that I collapsed those 2 understanding in one until I was encountered. I was forced to be able to map that my actions. And so that's sort of like a relearning moment for me. And then another thing I felt that I was never experienced before is that because I never seen negative tokens before, somehow when Maxine was presenting her actions, I felt really uncomfortable about this negative token symbol, I just don't really know where my difficulty comes from. And later on, I realized that there was unconsciously, I already associated negative numbers with debt kind of situation only. So like it's something, is a one person that, I don't own other people money. So you don't have the money, but you own people money. That's the negative, is the situation that relate to negative numbers. For me, that seems like so ingrained in my consciousness. That's why when I was presented with negative token, that kind of have this conflict with what I have already understood before. And so through that realization, I realized that, actually negative numbers could represent as something like, because my philosophical difficulty was that how can you represent having nothing, not having something as having something? So when negative token showed up, you actually have something. But and my understanding of a negative number is associated with not having something, right? So through that, I kind of unpack my kind of ingrained understanding, and then I relearn my understanding of zero and negative number. And through this process, I felt this whole exercise is extremely useful, not only for me as an experienced teacher, but also for student teacher, and can be useful for my students. And it's also through this process I understand how my student might feel struggle with negative number. Because personally, I did not really teach a lot about negative numbers, so I'm probably not very familiar with the embodiment of negative numbers. And plus, during this process, I also need to figure out whether those rules that I use to generate new actions that can always work. So those are also logical thinking there. So I found this exercise very useful and very powerful. And that shows me that how when we can work with equivalent representation of the same thing, we are actually limited and empowered by both of them. And it is what we can do or not do in each representation system that's interesting here. When you have tokens, you actually can physically be taken away, and that allow that the negative number can be represented as having something. On the number line, that you cannot represent it as having something. And so I found this space in between. That's why I'm very keen in trying to generate equivalent expressions of the same idea. You might say, okay, still the same ideas? Okay, maybe it's not just the same idea. It could be the same form that you see. And that I can explain a little bit more when we talk about the concept of equivalency. Okay. Recursion, and through this, my interpretation of all those forms, and I understand it's not just have the initial connotations and such as looping back, continuity, repetition with variation and reflection, but also now I understand it definitely a recursion as a play with contingent equivalency. This keyword here is important, contingent. Okay, so equivalency, and I theorize it, is as a perceived conditions of two things being the same, similar, associating, and resonating. If you see those two images, they are look exactly the same, and that's one situation that you can establish equivalency. That's not very new, and the similarity situation can be generated if you felt this one image kind of look like resemble the other. And association can be generated if one thing is often comes together with another. For example, dandelion always showed up with clove in my yard, right? So I kind of associate those two. And so I can call them sort of equivalent. When I talk about this category called weed, right? I can say, oh yeah, there goes weed. And then resonating is it's a situation that you can actually generate it through, when you feel something, when you see, for example, seeing this dandelion image. For me, seeing dandelion, it can resonate with me with infinite, because think about after your hard work in the garden one day, the next day you open your window, you see more dandelions, right? So it's like a battle with infinity. So you can see those two experiences can resonate with each other. Equivalency is the concept primarily established through partial similarity or correspondence, or in other words, analogy. And it's a contingent, heuristic, and playful interpretation. So it's pretty individual. It's a change over time too. And it's affected by both what is expressed, which is message, and how things is expressed, which is the medium. We can take a look if we have a math content, what it might look like. And so the top row is established by following the lead of message. So if I understand, if I see the sign that I treat it as half, then I could think, okay, it means 1 divided by 2, it's the same as this cutting a melon image. And it is, if my understanding it's a little bit advanced, then I can say, okay, oh, this is just a fraction. So it's just, it's similar to another fraction, A over B. Or it's similar to an image that I see in this image, these two people have this proportional relationship, right? And I can also associate, because I understand the meaning of the sign as a half, and I can associate it with a sharing or doubling experience. And I can also say that this sign here resonating with me, it is through this connection to a balancing experience. So, because if you cut something into half, if you separate something into half, you basically establish two sides, one side equal to another. So it's kind of balancing experience. The bottom row is established by following the lead of medium. So if you look at here, the reason I changed revealing to a re-encountering is try to de-emphasize in the eyes and try to bring this our different kind of mode of knowings into consciousness. And so it can, including other sensors, the information that you can get from other sensors. But here I can say, using one example, I can say, okay, I just look at the sign and I think it just look the same as 1/2, because it says 1/2 to me. It looks just 1/2. And then I can also say this just look like one thing over another. And I can, another thing I can say about it is that 1/2 this kind of look can be associated with another two numbers, one over another, which the 2/1, because they are pretty close to each other. And the 1/2 can also resonate with negativity if a student, whenever they see this sign, it's connected to their negative experience reflections. Okay. Once we establish those equivalency, and we are actually have a chance to actually go between two different kind of expression of the same thing. They don't, because they are contingent, so that means they can be false. They can be useful for this particular situation, but as time goes on, it becomes problematic. And that's give us a chance to reconsider why we consider the previous equivalency. Why do we think that's okay and now it's not okay? So it gives us a chance to go back and see what we can learn about the idea kind of associated with this equivalency. So re-encountering is a process not really about getting more or finding the best or found one thing, the best interpretation or best expression and once for all. It's more about the growth in between, is to have at least two, constructs that's equivalent to each other and try to have them to inform each other so that we can grow in between. And it's to take the lead of what comes to meet us and say, okay, now here is a good enough for now equivalence that I generated, and we will go on to make sense or meaning, and then we will come back because there are still certain things I'm not sure yet. And so leaving is not really abandoning what we try to understand. And the words that we use more, it's the like, the phrase we use more in re-encountering can including it reminds me of something, it is like something, and what if one thing is like the other. Okay. Now I am this design model for recursive curricula. And this one is to try to encourage you to play with contingent equivalency across scales. It calls for shorter cycles. Because otherwise, if you give too much time for each thing to display, then the connection between them in a sequence will become harder to establish. So let's take a look at some examples. I guess I wonder whether I can still do this. Probably the 40s already. Okay. Just close your eyes and imagine. I'm just going to say a few things, and you just need to go through the process with me. There was nothing else you need to do. Imagine an orange. Then imagine a lemon. And then imagine an apple. Then imagine a bottle of apple juice. So I think you already feel that you've been there before, because what you have experienced is similar to what you have experienced at the beginning. It's just like what Florence is talking about, when the fourth thing showed up, she started to see the previous ones, as a whole. So a new category kind of came into existence when the new arrival showed up. And you probably did not really know that you were treating the prior three as a whole until the fourth thing showed up. Actually, you've been doing that all the time. So that's why I kind of pause and pause and pause. So consciously, we're actually making a lot of holistic understanding of the things that we've seen before. And so these two paths, actually, they are the same. They use the same model to design. So this model goes like something like this. Each new arrival reminds one of the immediate past and the past as a whole. You can see I draw the diagram here. So the orange showed up, and you probably don't know it's what category it belongs to. You don't even think about it. But by the time lemon showed up, you might say, yes, it seems like it's different from orange, and then you might generate, the first one as a sweet citrus kind of category, right? But you don't know what those two, what kind of category this two would belong to until apple showed up. When apple showed up, it's like, oh, okay, the previous two seems more like belonging to citrus fruit group. And now you actually have another whole that cover those three, but that category does not show up until you see apple juice. So I think this is the experience that we can try to invoke, we can try to design for in our curriculum design. And the new arrival actually introduce a difference, not in degree, but in kind. Okay. You might say, I know the time is pretty short now. So if you use that model and collapsed it with the other two recursive curriculum model, it reinforces this visualization of refractal-like recursive curriculum. If you treat recursive curriculum can start anywhere and ends anywhere, then you can see a fractal-like image, which is the image that I showed at the beginning of my presentation. The nodes here are all equivalent constructs. They're like the equivalent ideas or tasks. And the branches are between the nodes are the mathematical or curriculum events. And the loops, when I say the loop, it's the red loop, they represent different levels of abstraction and generalization. So in this particular visualization, the left-hand side is more about more abstract ideas. So that's why you see the number seems like a decrease. And the right-hand side seems has more number of nodes, just because it represents more concrete particular examples, right? And when you go for across, you walk on this tree, and I call it tree spiral, and if you get a path, that's the curriculum. And how can we design a walk or design a spiral tree? And one way is that we can start with an idea. I put a red dot there, is that's the idea where I start. And so if I look at this equation, this function y equal to kx, and I can think about how can I imagine it differently. And that probably will bring me the other two forms of the same thing. They look similar. And then I can consider how can I put them in different categories. And the category one category can subsume the other. So that brought me this image on the left-hand side. So the y equal to kx and y equal to x over k and belong to this category of y equal to ax. And it's different from the other category. And then you can continue to move on to generate even more abstract category to capture those two green nodes. And you can do the same thing at the more concrete parts, and then you can come up with more concrete examples. And then once this tree is got established, then you can have different way to walk on this tree. You can enter any dot, and then you can go to a different part of the tree to use the same curriculum task, and explore different things. But when you're doing that, you're actually experiencing different equivalent construct. And I will wrap it up after I show you this task, this final one. So instead of just generating ideas, you can also generating self-similar tasks. One way to do that is like what I did in the previous image. After I generated those three equations, and I can think about, oh, is there any task that can bring forth those three equations? Here is one possibility, is what if I give student a choice to generate their equation by just giving them some symbols. So those are the symbols that I give, and then they might play and then come up with those kind of equations. And then I can continue to consider what kind of parallel, equivalent tasks that can use for a different set of, mathematical construct. And here, as long I just change it very subtly from x to x squared, then I have a new set. Then after those two sets established, I can try to see is any a common task that I can use at the beginning, so that I can send the student into two possible directions. You might say, okay, how are they going through those two directions like one at a time? Yes, they can. They can also go to the directions, at once if we're designing parallel task. So we can have the random task and parallel task together to actualize a particular recursive curriculum. I think time's pretty set. So this is the last one that an experiment, which there was other slides. You can go to read it yourself and come to talk with me if you have any questions. And this is just that you can collapse two things together about idea and the task. You can generate equivalent task through looking at particular category. How can you look at the category and divide it into subcategory, which those are nested categories. So then you can have different lessons or units to cover different topic, yet they are actually equivalent. Here, again, timing is issues. I think the cycle need to be shortened. And so the equivalent construct can be visited very quickly. So then student can realize they are actually the equivalent concept. Okay, I think I should finish it, right? Because I want to give time for people to have ask questions too. That one I just mentioned to you, the experiment, actually lead to some children's picture books. You can go to my website and take a look. It's an interesting experiment. So I will not go there at this point. And I just going to go to this one. My effort is trying to build a recursive path with emergent ports. And that can happen when the teacher is trying to design curriculum and experimenting, and can allow us to have more flexibility to be able to help students in the classroom. When they bring us some new arrival, we can see the similarity, we could generate a new category, and then we can go to that directions. So that's something I will continue to do. And thank you very much for your attention.
Well, Lixin, thank you so much.